Good afternoon, everyone. I hope that you enjoyed your break. I'm Anne McBride, the Deputy Director of the Toribera Mediterranean Center, a joint project of the CIA and the University of Barcelona. As an educator, it is essential to me that the next generation of food industry leaders center their professional and personal being around creating a more sustainable world in all meanings of the word, from environment to equity. This means disrupting business models, not settling for incremental change, and perhaps most importantly, in a context of menus of change, develop ideas that can scale up. During this session, The Business of Change, Sustainability, Leadership, and Entrepreneurship, you will hear strategies to cultivate future leadership, from innovation in education to better connecting chefs and food business leaders to a broader world of change makers. Michael Kaufman, who was supposed to co-moderate this session, is unfortunately a victim of travel issues. I don't know if you remember those. But you're in most capable hands with Michael Backer, Vice President of Global Workplace Programs for Real Estate and Workplace Services, Google's renowned workplace programs and services such as food, transportation, event sustainability, and fitness and well-being. Michael knows a thing or two about developing sustainable leadership as head of a team at Google that thrives every day to make the workplace and the world a whole more sustainable. So it's my pleasure to welcome Michael.
Thanks so much, Anne. It is great to be with the audience, with you as well. And I'm actually thrilled in having a conversation today with two great change leaders. And that's what it's really all about. I would love to welcome Tanya Holland and Sam Pope. Tanya is the chef owner of Brown Sugar Kitchen and Town Fair, host of the podcast series Tanya's Table, and chair of the James Beard Awards Committee. Tanya, welcome.
Hi, thank you.
Well, Sam. Sam is the CEO and co-founder of Every Table, a social enterprise restaurant chain and board member of Feast. Sam, it's great to have you as well.
Nice to be here, thanks.
I truly admire what the two of you are doing in your own way. But for those who don't know you yet well, could you tell us a little bit more about your enterprise, what it is you're trying to change and how you go about it? And maybe Tanya, could we start with you?
Okay, sure. Well, I've been in the hospitality industry for, 30 plus years. And owning my own restaurant for 13. Moved into a neighborhood that was, really in redevelopment phase and had been occupied mostly by African-American families, a lot that had been disenfranchised, and it was known as a food desert. So unbeknownst to me, I opened up a cafe in a food desert and, had to really juggle serving the community and then destination diners, and really became aware of the disparities in access to good, healthy food through that journey. And I'm still in Oakland. I've moved to downtown Oakland, my restaurant, Brown Sugar Kitchen, and I have a museum at the Oakland Museum of California called Town Fair. As Michael said, I have a podcast, Tanya's Table, as well as a show that was on the Oprah Winfrey Network, Tanya's Kitchen Table, and I'm now a member of the Board of Trustees of the James Beard Foundation and the chair of the awards for this year, and I think for the next couple of years. So I just, try to use, try to lead by example and try to use my platforms to advance the access and, working with justice, equity, diversity and inclusion in this industry, working to advance it.
Thank you for that overview, Tanya. And how long has your newest restaurant been open yet?
My restaurant at the Oakland Museum has been open for 2 weeks.
And everything is running smoothly, easy peasy?
Well, as smooth as they can, considering the COVID restrictions and, what's going on in the world right now. Yeah, it's a great place to be.
That's awesome. Sam, what about you?
Well, actually, pretty similar thematically. I think our big focus is equity and food justice. And, I think our sort of core belief is that healthy food should be a human right and not a luxury product. And another way to think about that is, how come a sweet green salad costs $16 and burgers and fries cost $6? And, I think our core sort of belief around food is that sort of one of the major things messed up in the food system is that we've got a food system that's dominated by fast food and processed, shelf-stable CPG. But what people really need is fresh, whole, made from scratch food, but that is inordinately expensive. And so we've created a business that really, delivers on making healthy food basically less than the price of fast food. And how we do it is we have a central kitchen right now in Los Angeles, and now we're opening up in New York City. So Los Angeles and San Diego, where we've got a single kitchen where we get food directly from farms. And at that kitchen, right now it's 39,000 square feet. We've got, a ton of super talented chefs that are taking that produce and meat and turning them into fresh, healthy, delicious meals, and then packaging them in grab-and-go containers. And it sounds simple, but it's really the key economic sort of driver to have a single kitchen supporting all of our locations. And so, that means we'll put the food on a refrigerated truck after we make it in the morning and take it to one of our storefronts. And, the one way I like to think about every table is sort of juxtaposing us versus a standard restaurant. So, a standard restaurant might be 2,500 square feet of space and cost $1.5 million to build and require 10 people to operate. But our stores, because they don't have a kitchen, they're sort of like a pret-a-manger in New York, if you've been there, or it's basically 700 square feet and requires 1 to 2 people to operate it because there's no food preparation, and costs about $200,000 to build. And so because of this system of centralized production and small footprint grab-and-go stores, we can dramatically lower the price of healthy food such that we can make it affordable for everyone. But for us, we really believe that, affordability means different things in different neighborhoods. And so we'll open stores in, Brentwood and Santa Monica and more affluent communities, and we'll charge $7 to $8 a meal, which is a fantastic price, versus sort of standard fast casual at $15. But we'll also open stores in, less resource communities like Compton and Watts in South Los Angeles, where we'll sell the same meals for $5 or $6. And to be clear, we're profitable, quite profitable at those stores as well. So it's not about charity or subsidy, but it's really about creating a system that works for everyone.
That's a great overview, Sam. And as we're talking about change leaders over here, I'm just curious if you're willing to share a little bit more on how you came to your destiny I don't think you were born as a chef or as a restaurateur. So what brought you to where you are today?
It sounds trite, but it was really sort of civil rights movement. So I was, I grew up in Los Angeles and then went to school in New York and then went to Wall Street and was a hedge fund trader till I was 30. And while I was a, hedge fund trader sort of overlooking, Central Park in Manhattan, I was coming home at night and reading Taylor Branch's 3-part series on Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement. And, I was so, first of all, moved by the courage of that movement and the freedom riders and, sit-ins. But I was also sort of recognizing at the time that so much that was being fought for at that time, was still an issue today. And so I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew that, where I was sitting on Wall Street was, was not being a part of sort of solving the issues that I cared about. And so I ended up leaving and then coming back to Los Angeles. And then, funnily enough, my wife and I sat down one weekend and watched a bunch of Netflix food documentaries, Food Inc. and Forks Over Knives. And really the rest is history. But it was really Lori Silverbush's A Place at the Table. That was the first time somebody sort of had made this argument to me about the intersection of food and poverty. And that's when I really sort of came to understand that we'd, created this system that was extremely exclusionary and damaging, and that, it might be a life's work to try to contribute to solving that.
Thank you for sharing that. So Tanya, I want to go back to you. So you strike me as an individual who has broad aspirations and you have a very clear view on what you would like to see changed. Could you speak a little bit more about from what changes would you like to see in the broader food system? And how do you balance that with running a business? It's great to say I want to change the world, but you're an entrepreneur. You know the challenges of running a business and doing it in a sustainable way. How do you bring those two together?
It is very challenging to, run the business and to, get out there in the field and try to be influential. Luckily, the business, also the restaurant, is a great platform. I bring a lot of different people together from different backgrounds, and the platform has also allowed me to be seen as an expert in my field. So I get invited to participate in conversations like this and, bring my perspective, and also especially the perspective of my community, which is, as Sam knows, there's underserved people. Like you said, there's a lot of, poverty, and there's food deserts. And because of where I am or how I'm seen in the community, I can use my voice to help move forward some policy changes. I've done a lot of work with the James Beard Foundation with their boot camps. I've also done culinary diplomacy tours with the State Department, with Global SF. And I think those initiatives are really positive too, because I get to learn, new alternatives to proteins and sustainability practices that I can bring back to my restaurant and therefore back to my community. So it just, it's just kind of cyclical. I just try to get out as much as I possibly can and get involved and learn from my colleagues, and, just try to make the small changes that I can, because even though I also want to change the world, it's just really, one or two, people at a time, really.
And what brought you on this journey? Do you remember ultimately, was there a specific moment, or was there just an evolution that said, I'm going to use my platform, my brand, or my kitchens to make a broader difference versus just doing what you do really, really well?
Well, it's kind of a long story. I've had a long vision of, wanting to be a leader for a long time. I tell this true story. I asked my dad if I could be president when I was a young girl, and he said, yes, I could, which was, amazing that he told his young Black girl, like, yes, you could. But then he said, but I wouldn't recommend it. He said, it costs a lot of money and there's a lot of people blowing smoke up your butt. So I was like, okay, what about being an architect? And he said, well, well, you won't make any money. You should be an engineer. So I applied to all engineering schools. And then I fell in love with the show Fame, and I asked him if I could be a dancer. And he said he'd never put a dancer through school. So now I'm in the restaurant business, so I can be the president of my company, the architect of my environment, and play the music I want and dance all day long. So I'm doing exactly what I want to do. And I also, I have this journal entry from when I was about 12 or 13, and I wrote, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up, but whatever it is, I want to either be famous or change the world. And so I don't know, I just always had this like vision of change and connecting people. My parents had this gourmet club, and it was always 3 white couples and 3 black couples. And I grew up with that from the age of 7 to 27. And I was, just taught that food brought people together, and you can learn a lot from others by sitting down and having food. But also I've learned through my travels is that, how important food is, and food is used, often as a weapon. It's used as a way to, it's been used for, to keep people from, learning, to having access. If kids don't have nutritional meals, they're not learning right. And we see that a lot in the, in certain neighborhoods. I do a lot of work with No Kid Hungry. But once I opened my restaurant in this redevelopment neighborhood, and I saw how the developers were coming after me as a way to connect them to the community, I realized that I had some influence, and a lot of politicians would come to my restaurant and ask me to support them. So once I figured out that, I had this real influence, I knew that I wanted to use it for good to, really change how people are seeing food and eating.
And then running for president is still on your bucket list?
No. I would like to be an ambassador. That's what I like to be. I like to have whatever presidential candidate wants to appoint me to an ambassadorship. I'll take that.
Noted. Sam, I know that you have big plans. You really want to make impact at scale. Could you speak a little bit more about the opportunities that growth might bring to those aspiring leaders that wants to grow as well? Because I think we have a very clear view on how to bring on up-and-coming talent.
Yeah, super awesome. But the first thing I want to say is, Chef Tanya, I've got I'm part of a community group actually that's 1 white couple, me, and then a black couple, and then 2 mixed race couples, and we meet every month for dinner. It's sort of like a core sort of thing in my life. So it's super interesting.
That's awesome. Yeah, our community wasn't more diverse than that at that time, but I love to hear that. That's great.
So about scale, I mean, I think, to back up a little bit, like for us, I think there's sort of, our core value as a company is, we call it transcend the friction, which is basically means that there's all these sort of competing sort of things, values tugging at everything that we do. So for example, we've got to make our food really delicious, but we've also got to make it really healthy. And, we've got to make it extremely high quality, and we've got to make it extremely affordable. And so we think the magic comes from transcending those constraints. And the reason I bring that up is because there's 2 sort of values that I carry sort of in this company. And one is sort of community empowerment. And at the same time, when you're talking about fresh food, one of my beliefs, and we could go into sort of why this is that in order to get the price of fresh, healthy, delicious meals to the price of fast food, you have to create sort of massive scale. And there's a lot of capital sort of required to do that. And so we've actually sort of combined those 2 ideas through what we call our social equity franchise model. And so what that is that, when we started sort of creating successful restaurants or stores, we started to think about expanding and started to look hard at the franchise model. And, the interesting thing about the franchise model is that it's a great way for, businesses to expand. It's very capital light. Other people are putting in the capital. You get the sort of power of sort of true ownership, et cetera. But like so many industries, it's sort of focused on and really only for people that have capital or have access to capital. And as we know, with the sort of racial wealth gap, that distribution of wealth is not exactly equal. And so what we did is we created a social equity franchise model where we went to some of the largest foundations in the country, Kellogg Foundation, Kroger Foundation, California Wellness, Dignity Health, Annenberg Foundation, and received either grants or program-related investments, which are basically low-interest loans, so that we could basically finance talented entrepreneurs from historically marginalized backgrounds. And so how that works now is that we recruit super talented, entrepreneurs from a lot of the neighborhoods that we're working in, and we train them extensively, both in how to operate the restaurant, but also leadership and entrepreneurship in general. And once they pass a series of stages, we then offer them, hey, you can be your own franchise owner and we'll lend you the money. You don't have to put any capital up to own your own franchise. And so for us, that is the model for us, where our vision is, in Los Angeles alone, 400 to 500 restaurants, same in New York City and throughout the country, 10,000, 20,000 plus restaurants, all of which would be owned by entrepreneurs from historically marginalized backgrounds, running and owning the stores, but the entire operation and scale every table would do, and then sort of provide the food to the stores.
I love that model. From a timing perspective, from how much time do you think it's going to take you to scale up? And what are ultimately the barriers that you need to overcome to achieve the scale at the pace you want?
Yeah, I mean, we're sort of moving extremely fast. So, for example, this year we'll open in the neighborhood of 25 stores. And then in the next 5 years, the plan is to have as many as 500 stores open. But to get to, 20,000 stores will take, a lifetime, really. So 20, 30 years. And the challenge for what we're doing and the obstacles, the way I think about it is we've got all these tailwinds behind us, which is like, a world that is realizing that the current food system is making us sick. Government and healthcare all want, somebody to figure out this idea of how to make healthy food more affordable, accessible for everyone. And frankly, like, we're the only sort of player in the market sort of selling healthy food at these price points. But the reason we are is the challenge, really, which is to say that in order to get sweet green quality food to the price of $6, what you have to do is vertically integrate and become world-class at everything. And so that means procurement directly from farms, sort of high volume, production processes, last mile logistics, and how to operate stores. And as you know, that we have sort of multiple other business lines, including healthy vending machines and, e-commerce delivery to your home. So for us, the big challenge is just, can we execute at the world-class level we need? Because, as everybody who's in the food business knows, it's not a high margin business, and you got to fight for every single penny in that business. And we're no different.
Heard loud and clear. I'm going to go back to Tanya. So in order for you to really maximize the impact you want to make, you're probably dependent to an extent, largely on your leadership team in your restaurants. How are you cultivating change leaders among them as well? And what are your thoughts on, is the new generation similar as prior generations, or is actually what excites people today very different from maybe the generation you and I grew up with?
Yeah, I don't know. That's kind of a hard question. I mean, I was telling someone the other day, restaurants are like, hospital triages. There's always so much going on and changing, and to find leaders to develop in this job market is really hard. In the restaurants, a lot of staff, we're just trying to figure out how we can be sustainable as a business and pay them a sustainable wage, a fair living wage, so they can more than just, live in this community. I live in the Bay Area, which is very expensive. And so I'm finding that I'm investing in a lot of the younger folks and trying to get them to accept, the philosophy I have around sustainability. It's ongoing educationally. We have people from so many different educational and economical, social, and cultural backgrounds, speaking different languages, and it's a challenge to get everyone on the same page. And again, I just try to lead by example. Something Sam said made me think of the other challenges when you're trying to get people to eat healthy, and you're trying to show them how delicious this food can be, but everybody has their own version of deliciousness. And then with the cultural differences, I notice, especially in some of my Latinx employees, what they want to gravitate towards is the heavier proteins. And, there's just, it's a lot to try to get this educational piece going with the limited resources, I have as a restaurateur. But, just taking it, and I'm here to learn also, how to do more of that, just taking it a little bit at a time and try to make them understand why we're using compostable materials and how important it is to, reuse certain items. It's a lot on top of running a business.
I can only imagine.
Yeah.
So Tanya, just continuing with you. Sam is very clear that he wants to take over the United States with just yummy, affordable salads and more. What about you? If you would say 5 years from now and everything would ultimately just going well for you, what are your aspirations? Are you like Sam, or are you more of a different type of entrepreneur? And then my follow-up question as well, are there barriers in place for you that make it really, really hard to achieve your vision?
Well, you asked about my vision initially, and, like I said, I've been aspirational and for a long, long time, and was thinking I would have opened my first restaurant, with the trajectory I was on by 30 or 35 instead of, in my 40s, but it was lack of access to capital and information. And so, I feel like a little bit behind compared to what I want to accomplish. And some of the resources that I've sought out are starting to show up now, thanks to, the sort of racial reckoning and Black Lives Matter movement. But it has been a challenging journey. Imagine what I could have done had I had those tools and that access earlier. But I have big aspirations. I have an advantage. I think that my food is comforting food and familiar to a lot of people. And so when I can make it healthy and keep the flavors that people enjoy, it's a win-win. I would like to, do some licensing of my brand and open up in other markets around the world. Like I said, I hope to do more of the culinary diplomacy, hoping to travel next year to Japan with Global SF. And I just think these exchange of ideas internationally are really important for us to get to know each other's cultures and how we eat and, how we commune. And just the more that we can talk to people who, might not look like us and grew up differently than us, I think, the world will be a better place. And that's just always been something I want to do. And, I do aspire to have financial success, because that's, as we know, that's how you can make more impact, if you are the ones who can call the shots and write the checks, or, get the investors on board to empower, as Sam does, these emerging entrepreneurs in your own community. I mean, I would love to have a way to incubate. Right now I'm trying to, like I said, invest in my younger leaders, hoping that one day that they can take over the restaurant or open their own. And, it's all about creating some kind of legacy to leave behind. And that's the one that I hope to open doors for people that weren't necessarily open for me at the time that I wanted them opened.
Thank you for sharing that, Tanya.
Of course.
Sam, you obviously are looking for a great bunch of up-and-coming leaders. What is it that you're seeing in that group of leaders, and how you get them to be just as passionate about the changes you want to see? And is the next generation driven in different ways, excited about different ways? What are your thoughts about the next generation?
I mean, first of all, sort of what Tanya said is exactly right, which is like, this is the craziest labor market sort of we've ever seen, period. And it's sort of crazy out there. But in answer to your question, like for, our view, and that is sort of borne out, is that, opportunity, talent is equally distributed, but opportunity is not. And so for us, recruiting, for example, to lead our stores, it's a lot more powerful for us to say, this is not, $18, $16 an hour. This is like, you can own your own business, and, that could be $1 million business on your first store. And if you're super successful, you could get up to 6 or 7, or, create sort of super powerful financial independence and generational wealth. And so I think that's super attractive to, folks in, the places that we're working who might not ordinarily have sort of access to that capital. And I also think that, like, the sort of lucky thing I think about the sort of work that, Tanya and I are doing is that people are inspired by it and they all agree with it. Like, there's nobody out there who's like, some people should not have healthy food. It's like, this is an idea that just it's fully agreed upon. It's just, can we sort of manifest the solution, all of us sort of together in the way that Tanya was talking about.
Yeah. So what I hear clearly from the two of you is how chefs can be change leaders. So Tanya, if I can come back to you and your role within the James Beard Foundation, are there thoughts within the foundation on spotlighting change agents amongst the chef even more so than in the past? Might it be an opportunity to really highlight which chefs are using their platform to drive the changes, especially in the context of this conference, the menu of change?
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons why I became more involved with the foundation was through their boot camps that they were doing on policy and change. And they were bringing in experts to help educate chefs, and also to train chefs how to use their voice to create more, to be advocates for legislation. And from there, we got a lot of different conversations. And a lot of people know that, you had to cook at the Beard House in order to be maybe considered for an award. And, that was cost prohibitive to me. And so I vocalized that, as did others. And now they're, changing some of the methods and requirements for cooking there. They have a fellowship program. There's a Black and Indigenous fund, investment fund. There's a women entrepreneur leadership class, which I'm a graduate of. There's just so many different ways that they are making all of this, access to the Beard Foundation, which the Beard Foundation is known for recognizing excellence in our field, but making that platform of excellence accessible to different people, and not just European male chefs or American male chefs, is something that they're really focused on. And so it's really exciting to be a part of that. And I have been able to bring on more diverse people onto the awards committee, and making sure that the judging is equitable. They were already on this trajectory before I joined, and we're doing an audit. So there's a lot of great things on the horizon for the James Beard Foundation. And, it's an institution that's been around for over 30 years. So most businesses and institutions like that, sometimes you need an overhaul, and that's what's happening there. And I'm just, really, glad to be, helping them move forward.
I appreciate that. But maybe on a side, I'm going to do a quick plug for the CIA, because they're actually thinking through what is their contribution to the next set of change leaders as well. So in the fall of next year, they're going to launch a master's degree in food systems and sustainability. And it's really about sustainability from the field to the fork, and then with ongoing and integrated consideration for the health of their suppliers, employees, as well as diners. And it's really about the overall ecosystem. And with this program that's going to start in the fall of next year, to equip change makers both with the applied knowledge and skills, build out capacity, and really bring in lectures from the field as well that actually are changing systems on a daily basis. So I am very, very excited about what is coming in a year from now. And I think it's just another example of how an institution is both changing and thinking through how can we contribute to broader change as well. So I am sure there's more to come about that program. Let's talk a little bit about menus, as we are at the Menus of Change conference over here. I find, and obviously in my role at Google, the food team at Google gets to serve a lot of individuals on a daily basis as well. I have learned that it's easy to talk about changing menus. It is much harder to get ultimately diners to enjoy it in the way you would like them to. So maybe for the two of you, and Tanya and Sam, can you talk a little bit more about your journey from maybe more animal protein heavy in the past, and what you mentioned as well, Tanya, or balance going forward? How does it work for both your employees, the great culinarians, and just as importantly, your buyers, the consumers? Are they enjoying it just as much, and how do you get them along?
You want to start with me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah. So, my menu at my first location was really dictated by customer demand, and everybody, wanted fried chicken. And, chicken is fairly sustainable. We would get, free range chicken, and, fortunately enough to be in California and have it sourced from not too far away. Then about 3 years later, I opened a barbecue restaurant, and I was trying to serve sustainable meats. And as I said, serving sustainable meats is not sustainable because nobody wanted to pay for them. And, they were definitely pricier, and it was a lot of labor and a lot of waste. And so I closed that. And then when I had the opportunity to open the museum, one of the reasons why I won the contract is because I have, I said that I was going to produce a plant-forward menu and plant-based forward menu. And so I won the contract, and that's what we're doing. And we have a vegetable garden, and we're just trying to make it, as delicious as possible. Any protein I have on there is sustainable. Right now I have some, Monterey Bay is where I source. Monterey Fish Company is where I source my sustainable seafood from, and we have some shrimp on the menu and chicken. And I'm even, thinking of reducing that. And it's really, that's a 1/10 of the menu. So it's been fun for me, because I can follow the seasonality of California, and I have access to a lot of, interesting variety of ingredients. And then it's a way for me to be a little bit more creative. And so far it's been well received. Like I said, it's only been 2 weeks, but people are very excited that that's what we're doing. And we're lucky we have an organic tofu company here in Oakland called Hodo Soy. So I'm planning some dishes around that ingredient as well.
One quick follow-up, Tanya, before I go back to Sam. So when you make these subtle changes to move to a more balanced plant-forward diet, do you change clientele, or do you change the way your existing clientele is enjoying your dishes?
I don't think I'd change clientele. I mean, I've had a lot of regulars for 13 years. There may be some people who drop off that I don't notice, but we're actually gaining, I think, new clientele because, there's more of an awareness of the effects of, protein production, our environment, all the conversations that are happening right now. People are really excited about this new menu at Town Fair. And, we'll bring some of those changes over to Brown Sugar Kitchen as well.
That is awesome. Sam, how are you bringing your consumers along?
I mean, I think for us, it's sort of about taking a step back and sort of defining sort of healthy on some level. Like, when I say healthy food, a lot of times people will assume that we're talking about lemon and wheatgrass salad, basically. But we sort of look back at, how food has evolved over the last, hundreds and thousands of years. And it's really been only in the last 50 years that this crazy obesity epidemic and processed food and all this industrial food system has been created. And before that, what you basically had was all these incredible cuisines, created by all of these cultures, and they basically had sort of two things in common, which is that they were, for the most part, delicious, and they were also healthy. And that's just because sort of we've evolved and learned how to eat from our environment, et cetera. And so what Every Table does, like the theme of our menu, is celebrating the cultures and cuisines of Los Angeles. And that's really about sort of real food with a lot of taste, as Tanya talks about, that, is made from scratch. And so, for example, one of our best-selling dishes is called Trap Kitchen Chicken Curry. And Trap Kitchen are these, awesome young chefs from Compton who started this soul food delivery business on Instagram that got out of their grandmother's kitchen, that got so popular that they had 300,000 Instagram followers and then promptly got shut down because that was illegal to run a business of that size out of your grandmother's kitchen. But they're incredible. And so we partnered with them and made a version of their chicken curry for our restaurants. And it wasn't particularly different, and Tanya can correct me if I'm wrong, than they sort of typically make it. And so, we sell that, and it's been a bestseller sort of ever since we started. We also did a similar sort of structure with Brad Johnson, who runs Post and Beam, which is a Black-owned restaurant in South LA that won the LA Times Jonathan Gold Award for the best restaurant in all of Los Angeles. And, we made sort of a Creole chicken dish that sells incredibly well as well. So for us, the secret is just whole food made from scratch with a lot of taste that sort of celebrates sort of different cultures and cuisines, and it seems to work. We do have a salmon superfood salad that actually also sells really well in Brentwood and in Compton, basically.
So it's fair to say, Sam, if you just think about tasty food, convenient, and an accessible price, you have a winning recipe.
That's right.
Maybe if I can shift the conversation slightly, and we're talking about change leaders. What I personally find really, really challenging is there are so many things we want to change concurrently. We're talking about changing menus. We're talking about reducing loss and waste. We're talking about reducing single-use plastics. There are DEI opportunities as well. What are your thoughts on how you can ultimately address multiple things concurrently? But you cannot fix the world overnight. So how do you make trade-offs, and how do you share it with your employees as well as your consumers? You want to start, Tanya?
Sure. Another thing, again, thinking about what Sam's doing, why I got the contract at the museum is I also wanted to use this concept to recognize the diversity of Oakland. There's so many different cultures that live here and different pockets of neighborhoods. And so my goal is to bring in my colleagues who are cooking food different than I am, whether it's South Indian, Preeti Mistry, or my friend Dominica, who cooks Oaxacan food, and have them pop up in my location. And we cook something healthy and plant forward together. And then, maybe one item stays on my menu. And again, it's sort of, I get to, create my own little model UN in my restaurant. I just think that, again, as much as we can, educate the consumer, educate the customer, my employees are going to just by getting that exposure, they're going to be, learning about sustainability and, eating more vegetables. And for me as a restaurateur, it's a better food cost item for me than the protein. So, if we can be profitable, then I can do more programs and more education for my employees and, for the guests who come to my restaurants.
Thank you. What about you, Sam?
Well, I think you're absolutely right, which is sort of the beauty of our business and the food business in general is that it really sort of touches everything, including, all the way back to supply chain, of which we try to use regenerative agriculture and go directly to farms, but also single-use plastic, which somebody in the chat had sort of mentioned, which, we're trying to work on a reusable system and a fully sort of cycled system where there's no sort of single-use packaging. And then you have, stuff that we've been talking about, wages in the kitchen and equity ownership. And, we do a lot of work to sort of like try to make our internal company sort of equivalent to sort of our views on what we're trying to sort of create in the outside world. But I think also to your point, it's like, there's just so much, and it's not, we can't do it all at once. And don't let me pretend to you that we've sort of figured all of this out. Like, it's a journey. And like, it's funny. It's like, when we started, one of the things that we were, really sort of focused on was like, the difference between sort of conventional produce and organic was on some level, like sort of like elitist. Like, we agreed that organic would be better. And at the same time, we needed to make sure that we were affordable in the neighborhoods that we were trying to serve. Now, fortunately, we sort of come a long way and have been able to sort of get volume and scale so we can start building that organic and regenerative sort of supply chain. But it's been a journey that we didn't start off, perfect sort of from the beginning.
Yeah. I know we're getting close to the end of this session, so I'm going to ask you, what will be your key message to the audience through the context of being a change leader? So if you want to make a difference in your role, what would you advise them to do? And I can start. What I've learned is that wanting to change the world can be truly overwhelming. And for me, it's almost like the best way to start making a difference is to start. You have to get off your chair and you have to start. And we should celebrate those who are actually trying. It might not work, it might be your change, but let's celebrate those who are trying. And I have deep admiration for what the two of you are doing in your respective ecosystems. So my message to the audience is just start and celebrate the failures and get up again and do it again. Tanya, what is your message to the audience?
Yeah, I agree. The little changes will add up to make big changes. So just start by making small changes, using compostable materials, reusable straws, reusable, containers, patronizing restaurants like mine and Sam's that, support sustainability and empowering people who would not ordinarily have access to, creating a sustainable living wage for themselves and maybe even to be entrepreneurs and business owners. We're all in this together, and we have to remember that.
Thank you. What about you, Sam?
I mean, I think I will, bring in, Steve Jobs to this, whatever you think about him. But, he has this great line that is like, it was an important moment in sort of his life when he sort of realized that, everything that we sort of accept as normal are just things that were created by people who were sort of no smarter than any of us, basically. And so I think my sort of foundational belief is like, when it comes to the food system, we need like massive structural change and change on the edges, or, slight innovations in making, packaged food a little bit is not sort of going to do it. And so that's what I would say is like, yourself or support those who are really swinging for the fences and trying to change the system from the ground up.
Well said, Sam. And I think with that, thank you so much for your time today. Tanya and Sam, good luck on your endeavors. And to all of us, let's visit your spaces and then celebrate your successes. Greg.
Michael, thank you. Thank you, Tanya and Sam, for that concluding general session, shedding such a strong light on the possibilities around leadership and entrepreneurship in the business of change. Now I'd like to welcome Walter Willett back to the screen to share some final thoughts about the summit as we close out our general session. We still have more great programming left today, but we wanted to pause at this moment for some reflections. Let me start just by saying how hopeful I've found this conference to be, that despite having all lived through the last 16 months of the global pandemic, the spirit infusing this summit seems to be that we're ready to join hands for the hard work ahead around food system transformation. A few thank yous. I want to thank Walter and his colleagues at the Harvard Chan School for our great partnership, as well as Michael Kaufman and Siobhan Hansen for their joint leadership of the Business Leadership Council that advises menus of change. We're grateful for this year's summit faculty and valuable insights from presenters across a multiple series of sectors all across the country, folks joining from Europe and Asia. A big thank you to our sponsors, especially this year, who made it possible to bring this program to our audience of chefs and operators completely tuition-free. And thank you to all of you who've joined us on one or more online platforms. At the end of the day, Menus of Change is a learning community, and we all learn from each other. We look forward to hearing about your successes as you work to inspire others in your community and your spheres of influence around these important imperatives of change. And finally, I want to extend a very big thank you to our team here at the CIA who worked tirelessly to make our 2021 summit during an exceptionally difficult time in our country and in our industry, a team that when confronted with a seemingly endless stream of challenges kept pulling rabbits out of a hat. So with that, Walter, what final thoughts do you have as we come to the end of this summit?
Well, thanks, Greg. In addition to all those thank yous that I would really like to second, I especially want to thank everybody who joined us in the audience in participation and who participated in other ways in this 9th Menus of Change meeting. This was an extremely challenging last 15 months for the food service, and just surviving and being here, in fact, is quite an accomplishment. But I think we all realize that just going back to normal is not nearly good enough. Like Fabrice de Klerk described yesterday, we're just sort of climbing out of the pandemic. Not quite, and around the world there's still a huge amount of work to do, but we have other waves that are coming down upon us. Here we have, as a country, really entered a death spiral due to the pandemic. Life expectancy is going down, and unless we make some big changes, it's going to continue to go down. And of course, it's not distributed equally. Parts of our population, disadvantaged communities, are paying a double price here. And I live a few blocks from the Moderna headquarters in Cambridge, and I can tell you they do not have a vaccine that's going to cure this. The solutions, to a large extent, exist in the people who are attending this meeting. The climate change also, I think, as everybody realizes, is not just a wave, it's more insidious. It is literally and figuratively a rising sea, and it's going to be even more devastating than the pandemic brought up to us by COVID and obesity. In part because many of the changes that are starting to occur now are going to be irreversible unless we have very rapid action. Jeff Sachs outlined some of that. We really do need to pull out all the stops wherever we are and end fossil fuel consumption as quickly as possible. I've personally been trying to do this, riding my bike to work. We got a plug-in hybrid car. We signed up for all 100% green electricity. We are converted to electric water heater, still working on home heating, which we know uses a lot of fossil fuel. Air travel is a serious issue in our lives, and I have some ideas about how that can go green quickly if we put our efforts into it. But the food sector is really a very key part. If we do not transform that, we cannot mitigate adequately climate change. And of course, that's why everybody here has a critical role to play. The most important shift we need to make is simply the kind of food choices that we make. And in our Eat Lancet Commission, when we boil it all down, it comes to a very simple plan. I call it 1+1, and most people can figure that one out. It's basically about 1 serving of dairy foods a day and 1 serving of some other animal source protein a day if we want to have it. And we can, of course, go more in the vegetarian direction if we'd like to do it. But that simple 1+1 with a base of plenty of fruits and vegetables, whole grains, healthy fats, can produce and lead the world to a healthy and sustainable and desirable, flavorful diet. So Michael Kaufman at our opening session asked Jeff Sachs and I if we were optimistic, and none of us could quite say that, but I think we agree with your word, Greg, which is hopeful. And we do see solutions are possible. It will take the effort of everyone here. So I'm really grateful again that to all of the people who have joined us today. We can see, we do have a vision. We heard about that from Tanya and Sam just in the earlier parts of this session. But we all need to do everything possible if we're going to have a good outcome. So thanks again, and hopefully we will see each other in person next year.
Right. We look forward to that. Thank you, Walter. And with that, I will yield the virtual floor back to our CIA colleague and program director extraordinaire, Jackie Chi.
Thank you so much, Greg and Walter. As Greg mentioned, we do have lots more amazing content, so don't go anywhere yet. Here's an overview of what we've still got planned for the rest of the afternoon, including more networking and sustainability innovation hub time, as well as breakout sessions. A few reminders before we go to our networking time, including our dates for next year's 10th annual Menus of Change Summit, taking place June 14th through the 16th in Hyde Park, New York, as well as for Worlds of Flavor at Copia in Napa Valley. MOC attendees who work in food service operations get a special registration rate on Worlds of Flavor through July 9th, so register soon. And be sure to check out our Global Plant Forward Culinary Summit taking place at Copia as well, running April 26th through 28th next spring. For this summit, don't forget that registered attendees have access to all of the presentations, recipes, and recordings of all sessions, so you can watch anything you missed, couldn't attend, or just want to see again. Please share your feedback with us and let us know your ideas for future presenters and session topics. And here's information on how you can get CEU credits for the sessions you've been watching live. We'll also include this information in an email following the summit. Our breakout sessions will be starting in about 20 minutes. But first, enjoy networking sponsored by the American Pecan Council and presented by the National Pecan Shellers Association. I hope you got a chance to try out their pecan slider snack inspiration. We've still got some cool prizes up for grabs, and you can increase your chances of winning by participating in all of the networking activities at this networking time, as well as again after the breakout sessions. Today's networking chat prompt is, what is your one big idea for selling more sustainable dishes to consumers? And Peter Hoffman will be answering questions and discussing his memoir, What's Good, in the Meet the Author booth at 12:55 p.m. Pacific, 3:55 p.m. Eastern. These two networking times coming up are your last chance to visit our generous sponsors in the Innovation Hub, where things are still buzzing with lots of activities going on. And just before we jump into networking, just a quick shout out again to all of the CIA staff behind the scenes who have been helping you and assisting you. I just want to call them out by name: Christina, Sherrod, Chad, Casey, Katie, Evan, Tony, Claudia, Patty, and of course, Greg Jesher as well. Let's now jump into networking sponsored by the National Pecan Shellers Association, and then we'll see you all in sessions for our final round of breakout sessions.